Today we will start discussing the rules of debits and credits. And to begin the topic, we need to figure out what is actually an account. An account is a record that shows increases and decreases in specific asset, liability, or owner's equity item. So think of it as almost a folder where you will accumulate specific details for cash, accounts receivables, notes receivables. So you don't have one ginormous folder for everything, but you have a better system where you can find things faster and easier. And you can see that this is a graphic representation of an account, and it's called T account form because, as you can see, there's a little T up here, and it has a debit side and a credit side. Debit and credit are actually abbreviation from Latin, and we used to debit being left and credit being right. Both are abbreviation where debit is from Latin, that means receive, and credit is from Latin, meaning give up or give away. But again, please stick with left and right. Sometimes students get confused and they start thinking in terms of debit and credit cards. Debit and credit cards have nothing to do with debits and credits in accounting. So I would say give up that idea right away and just think of left and right and nothing else. How do they work? Well, since this system is actually a pretty old system, I'll discuss it in either this video or next one, depending on the length. It works as a scale. So I put a little scale up here. So for example, we have one transaction for $10,000 we recorded, then another one for 8, and then the second transaction had to go on the other side on the credit. So you will add up all the debit transactions and all the credit transactions. Take the difference between the two and put the difference on the heavier side, similar to the scale. And opposite, if you have this kind of view where your credits are heavier than your debits, then you'll have to put the balance again on the heavier side, or in this case, it will be credit side. All right, let's dive into history, and that's probably one of my favorite topics ever. Believe it or not, accounting is pretty old, over 500 years old. So who started it all? Well, Luca Pacioli, who was a Franciscan monk, is credited as or honored as the father of accounting. Some people say, well, he stole that idea from merchants in Venice, and he might have, but he was the one who actually documented, wrote it up, and come up with this system. So he was a mathematician and actually taught at the University of Milan as well. So pretty good and decorated teacher for those times, because there were quite a few PhDs for that generation. And again, we're talking 1470s. That's when he published his math book, and accounting was only one chapter in that book. How far ago is 1470? Sometimes if you don't have a timeline, you cannot put it in perspective. Well, 1470s is when there was an industrial revolution going on, and the books just started being published. So they used to be handwritten, and now the books were published. So his book was one of the very few that was published. So it just shows just how much influence that book had, and it was translated into many languages. In addition, just in that time, in math, instead of using only positive numbers, well, at that time, they didn't even have notion of negative numbers. So everything had to be positive. You can think of winning and losing, but they didn't say -5, -10. So math was a whole lot harder. And another fun fact, Luca Pacioli was actually a teacher for Leonardo da Vinci, and Leonardo happened to illustrate one of his textbooks. So you can imagine how much the price of that textbook was. So let's see how the rules of debits and credits actually came about. And you probably do not hear it somewhere else. So exact this explanation. So you know basic accounting equation. It's your assets equal liabilities plus owner's equity. Okay, if I were to ask you to unfold the basic accounting equation into the larger one, the expanded one. So you will give me this: assets equals liabilities plus owner's capital minus owner's drawings. So that's the first two, the owner's transactions. And then plus revenues and minus expenses again. Now, if you think about it, I just said 500 years ago, they did not have minuses. So what are we going to do? Mathematically, you might recall that you could either add owner's drawings and expenses to both sides of the equation, or sometimes we would just say, just move those negative numbers into the opposite side of the equation while switching the signs. So in this case, like this. So we will have assets plus expenses plus drawings equals liabilities plus revenues plus capital. So again, I only did mathematical change. I didn't do anything else. Well, Luca noticed that mathematically, these three groupings remain positive, and if you happen to switch them on the other side of the equation, you will have to switch the sign, right? And they will have to be negative. And then these liabilities, revenues, and capital, again, they're positive on the right side of the equation, and you will have to switch the sign and go negative if they were to have a transaction on the other side. So the rules of debits and credits for these three groupings will be like that mathematically. I will have to put a plus on the debit side, they're positive on the left side of the equation, and they're negative on the credit or the right side of the equation. And we have also a normal balance notion. What's normal balance? Normal balance is the side of increase. So if plus is the debit, this must be the normal side, or normal balance. Let's go on the other side. So for liabilities, revenues, or capital, they will behave this way. They're all positive on the credit side or the right side of the equation. And they will be all negative on the left side, on the left side of the equation. And their normal balance is the credit side. So again, there's nothing bad or good being on the credit or the debit side. It just means they're left and right and they're different. Okay? So forget those debit credit cards. Don't think about them. I'm going to give you a small mnemonic that I learned a long time ago, and I cannot give a credit to that person because I don't remember where I got it. So my apologies. If I were to put all the normal balances on just one T account, so think of it as these are all positives, okay? So which groupings are positive on the debit side? So it will be your assets, expenses, and drawings. Okay. And what do I have positive on the credit side? Liabilities, revenues, and capital. Okay? So if you want, you can almost put a tiny note card and just put this to make it easier, or you can make a couple of T's or just one T for assets, expenses, and drawings, and then another T for liabilities, revenues, and capital. Either way is fine. To help you remember this, what could you do? Here's your mnemonic. Ready? After eating dinner, let's read comics. Again, after eating dinner, let's read comics. Now I would say make up a few of these note cards, put them all over your room, drive your roommate crazy. The faster you remember them, the better off you are. I explained you the logic, and now it's just pure memorization of how does this work.